I used to believe you could build a second life in the shadows and still come home clean. That was the lie I lived on, quietly, carefully, for years. From the outside, my world looked ordinary enough. School lunches, laundry, a husband who knew my coffee order without asking, children who still climbed into my lap like I was their safest place on earth. I wore the costume well. I smiled at neighbors, I kept calendars and appointments. I said, I'm fine, with the easy confidence of someone who could pass any test. But inside, something was eroding, slow as rust, relentless as hunger. It didn't start with an affair, it started with a private door I opened and couldn't close. A habit that became a ritual that became a need. At first, it was just escape, the kind everyone justifies. Long days, loneliness, the ache of wanting to feel wanted. Then it became a tunnel I crawled into whenever the real world demanded more than I wanted to give. It was easier to disappear into a screen than to sit with discomfort. Easier than asking for help. Easier than admitting that I was losing myself. I didn't think of myself as a villain. Villains are loud. They slam doors. They relish damage. I was quiet. I told myself I was contained. Online, I found a place where no one knew my name and no one expected anything from me except my attention. I talked to strangers like they were mirrors. I learned how to split myself into pieces. The competent mother, the dutiful wife, and the woman who fed a secret appetite in the dark. And this is the part that still makes my stomach turn when I say it out loud. I got good at lying without lying. I would come upstairs and kiss my husband and still feel honest because I hadn't spoken a false word. I had simply withheld the truth. I'd hidden it in plain sight. I told myself, if it stays digital, it isn't real. If it isn't real, it can't hurt anyone. If it can't hurt anyone, it doesn't count. That's how addiction speaks, softly, logically, like a friend. It doesn't roar, it reasons. Until the day it doesn't. The physical line didn't feel like a cliff when I approached it. It felt like a step, a rational step disguised as opportunity, wrapped in adrenaline. I didn't plan it for months like a mastermind. That would have been easier to hate. But when the moment presented itself, I made a choice with my eyes open. I crossed the line. And then, morning came. There is a particular cruelty to waking up sober in a stranger's room. The air is too still. The light is too honest. The body remembers what the mind did its best to blur. You sit up and suddenly you feel like you've been watching someone else's life. And you realize just someone else is you. I remember the exact weight of the dread, as if gravity doubled. I remember thinking, I have ruined everything. Not in theory, not someday, now. The hardest part wasn't the fear of being caught. It was the disgust of seeing myself clearly. I went home carrying my secret like a live grenade. Every sound in the house felt amplified. My children's voices, the hum of the refrigerator, the casual rhythm of a life that didn't know it was about to split in two. My husband looked up at me, and the normalcy of his face, his trust, made me feel like I couldn't breathe. I confessed. I wish I could tell you it came from courage. Maybe it did in a broken way. But mostly it came from panic and shame and the sudden understanding that hiding would poison everything anyway. I expected rage. I expected a storm. Instead, I got silence. Silence is a different kind of violence. It doesn't strike, it withdraws. It turns the house into a museum of a relationship that used to be alive. My husband didn't shout. He didn't throw things. He simply became absent. He left early. He stayed out. At night, he slept on the couch as if our bedroom had become a contaminated room in a hospital. When I tried to talk, he would look through me like I was a stranger asking for directions. I tried apologies, real ones, shaking ones, the kind that feel like peeling your skin back. They landed like pennies thrown at a closed door. Days passed like that, each one heavier than the last. I started to understand something I'd never respected before. Anger can be a bridge. Silence is a moat. Then, late one night, my phone lit up with a message from him while he was out somewhere I couldn't picture. Just one question. Was it premeditated? Not why, not who, not how could you. Premeditated. Because if it was, it meant I wasn't just weak. It meant I was willing. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time. That was the moment where I could have lied, the moment where a small lie might have bought me temporary mercy. But temporary mercy is what got me here, so I wrote the truth, even though it felt like signing my own sentence. Yes. Not planned for months, no, but chosen in the moment, absolutely. I saw the door and walked through it. After that, the air between us changed again. The silence wasn't blank anymore. It was loaded. And then something strange happened, something I still struggle to explain without sounding like I'm trying to justify it. We became physically close at times, like two people drowning and grabbing at each other just to prove there was a body on the other end. It was confusing and volatile. Some nights there was tenderness that felt like a miracle. Other nights there was distance even in the same bed, an invisible wall neither of us could name without breaking completely. I could feel the conflict inside him. I could feel the disgust and the grief wrestling with memory and habit and whatever love was still alive under the wreckage. And all the while, my guilt had layers, because confession is rarely complete in one breath. There are the facts you say out loud, and then there are the deeper truths you don't know how to share without making everything worse. I became obsessed with disclosure, with coming clean in some perfect way, as if the right set of words could reverse time. I thought if I dragged every shadow into the light, maybe the light would purify it. But light doesn't always purify. Sometimes it just reveals. By the second week, silence turned into hostility. The house became a minefield. Every attempt I made to show change, therapy appointments, cutting off online accounts, blocking the pathways I'd used to disappear, felt meaningless to him, like I was trying to mop up an ocean with a paper towel. If I asked, "How are you?" he'd snap, "How do you think I am?" If I said, "I'm sorry," he'd throw it back like a bitter taste. I deserved his anger, I did, but I wasn't prepared for how completely he stopped seeing me as his partner. I had become the source of infection, the thing to survive. Then he told me he needed to tell his family. That was when fear found a new shape. His parents and siblings weren't just his to me, they had become my family too. Especially because my own family story had holes, losses I learned to live around, empty chairs that never stopped being empty. His family had filled those spaces over the years. They were the people who showed up with casseroles when someone was sick, the people who cheered at birthdays, the people who made our home feel anchored. To lose my husband was one thing. To lose them felt like being orphaned twice. But I agreed because I'd already taken so much from him, his security, his dignity, his belief in what we were. If he needed their support to keep standing, I didn't get to deny him that. He said, with the bluntness of someone whose world has cracked, he would listen to them about divorce, maybe even more than he'd listen to me. And I understood in that moment how thoroughly I'd lost my place. We continued talking, difficult ones, raw ones, long ones that left us both shaking. There were moments I mistook for hope, moments where he'd ask a question and I'd think, he's still here, he's trying. Then came the Saturday afternoon that ended everything. It was around 4 p.m. The time is branded into me because it was bright daylight, too bright for something so devastating. We were in the middle of another conversation. I was trying to finish confessing. I thought I was being brave. I thought honesty, fully delivered, would finally stop the bleeding. Instead, it ripped the wound open. As I spoke, I watched his face change, color rising in his cheeks, his jaw tightening, his eyes filling with something that looked like pain and fury fused together. The details weren't just information to him, they were images, they were knives. He started yelling, loud, sharp, a sound I had never heard from him in all the years I'd known him. And then the worst part happened. My children heard. They came running down the stairs, drawn by fear and instinct, and the awful fact that kids always know when a home is breaking. They saw their father shouting. They saw their mother on the floor. Because yes, I sank like my legs had stopped being legs, crying and begging in a way I didn't recognize as my own voice. In their eyes, I watched something shatter that I can't put back. The belief that parents are unbreakable. My husband tried to take them out of the house, to get them away from the chaos, but they wouldn't go. They clung to me, terrified, as if leaving my side meant abandoning me to disaster or abandoning themselves to the unknown. That moment, my children gripping my arms while my husband stood there with a face I couldn't reach, will haunt me longer than any consequence a court could ever hand down. Because that was the moment my private choices became my children's trauma. That afternoon, he walked out. I sent a message, desperate, humiliating, honest, begging him to come back, to talk, to breathe, to not do this in a single slammed door. His reply was cold and final. He said our marriage was over. He said we would not live in the same house. He said lawyers would be involved if we couldn't agree on custody. And then, like the universe closing a lid, he blocked me. No more messages, no more chances to explain, no more room to bargain with reality. That night, I existed inside the aftermath like a person wandering through smoke after a fire. The house looked the same, but everything in it felt rearranged. The family photos on the wall, the children's backpacks, the quiet corners where our life used to rest. My 12-year-old son, too perceptive, too wise in the worst way, said he would tell his dad to forgive me. He didn't need the details. He didn't need a confession. Children read the emotional weather better than adults do. He knew I had done something that made forgiveness a heroic act. I cried after he went to bed, the kind of crying that isn't dramatic, just emptying, like my body was trying to wash itself clean from the inside out. And somewhere in the small hours, I stopped bargaining and started accepting. Reconciliation wasn't a maybe. It wasn't on the table waiting for me to earn it. The life I had known was gone. In the days that followed, I did one of the only tangible acts that felt like it mattered. I deleted the accounts. I severed the pipelines. I cut off the online world that had fed my secret life and convinced me I could live without consequence. It didn't fix anything. It didn't undo the damage. It wasn't a dramatic redemption. It was just the first step in learning how to stop running. I don't get to write the ending where my husband comes home and everything heals neatly. That isn't real life. That isn't what my choices earned. What I can write, what I have to live, is the ending where I step into the consequences awake, where I become someone my children can trust again, even if their father never does. Where I learn that the hardest thing about a double life isn't keeping the secret. It's realizing too late that you were the one splitting yourself in half and calling it survival.